Hi, my name is Sophia Stewart, and I'm going to talk to you guys today for my PI project about standardized testing. I don't think this is a very effective way to show a student's knowledge on a subject and how successful they are in school. I definitely think it can be helpful in some instances, but we put so much pressure on these kids to score well on these tests, and it affects their future, or it can affect their future so much. And not one test or two tests should have that much effect on any student. First, let's talk a little bit about what standardized testing is. Basically, it's a test that all students in that particular grade will take all over the country. They have the same questions and the same answer choices. All of these tests are graded the exact same way, and it's a very fair way to test a student's knowledge and see how much they have retained through the school year, if they're where they should be, and kind of see where they're at. And that is a very good thing that standardized testing does. It's a great tool teachers and students can use to see if they've retained the information. But I think there's a lot of other things that should also play into role in deciding if a student's where they should be. That should not be the only thing that we use. And as a student gets older, so in third grade, a teacher will look at standardized testing, how they do throughout the year. There's a lot of things. But once a student gets to about high school, they're juniors, seniors, they're taking standardized tests and they're sending it to their colleges, and that has such a big effect. So as a student gets older, the pressure gets a lot higher. I want everybody to take a few minutes and think about your personal experience with standardized testing. Think back to if you felt any stress while taking it, how many you've taken, did you do well on it? Do you think it was an accurate description, or did you get an accurate result on how you were doing in that school year? For me personally, I was diagnosed with dyslexia when I was in third grade. It took me a really long time to learn how to read and write, and even now, I'm not super confident in I know how to read, I know how to write. I'm good at them both now, but sometimes I still feel that insecurity. And so when I was younger and I would take these tests, I would have a little extra time because of my disability, but I still struggled a lot, and the stress would make me do worse on my reading and writing because I was so stressed, and in the back of my mind I thought, I still don't know how to read, I still don't know how to write, I'm not where I should be. And I knew that these tests had a large effect, and so I did poorly on them. And so throughout the rest of my presentation, I want you guys to think about those type of things. Did you have anything that stressed you out a lot while you were taking these tests? And how did that affect you? Did it affect your score? Because I know personally, I knew the answers. I knew what that passage was saying, but in the moment, I was so stressed that I reverted back to kind of my old habits, and I had forgotten, or I couldn't put the right answer down. With that kind of introduction, I want to move on to the three main issues I see with standardized testing. First off, they change the way that teachers teach. They are teaching to the test. They are not making students curious anymore. They're just teaching what you need to know. My second issue is it holds too much weight. We put too much pressure on these students to get 100%, excel, be perfect on these tests when that's not realistic. And thirdly, and I would say most importantly, these tests are biased. They're set up and there's ways to cheat the system, but they're biased for certain people. So we're going to get into more detail on the three main issues that I've kind of showed. The first one is it changes the way teachers teach. That meaning they teach the test. Teachers have a lot of pressure put on them to make sure that their class, their set of students, do well on these tests because it's a direct reflection of this teacher's ability to effectively teach. So they stop trying to make students curious. The fun is taken out of learning, and instead they say, this is going to be on the test, you need to learn this, and that's what they focus on. They don't focus on the fun parts of learning. Oftentimes they just want their students to do well, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's important that we as teachers make sure students still enjoy learning, because that's how ultimately, if they're having a miserable time and they're not curious about the things they're learning, they're not actively involved in their academic journey, then they're not going to retain this information. And we've talked about this throughout the semester while reading our book. Things that are not on the test, like classes like art, PE, other electives, they are not on the test, and so a lot of times in school, they're not focused on as much and seen kind of as extras, not as important. But I don't think that should be the case. Some people are very, very artistic and want a career in photography. I was in a photography class in high school, and whenever the math teacher needed a little extra time, she'd go to my photography teacher and say, hey, do you mind if Sophia comes out during your class and we work on math? And yes, math is so important, but what if I loved photography and I wanted to be a photographer, and this math teacher is taking me out so I can learn math because that's going to be on the test and not photography? So I think a lot of times schools kind of overlook extracurriculars because they're not on standardized testing. And my last kind of point in this section is students learn and are taught in school, and maybe if they go to like a test prep, they're going to be taught how to guess correctly. They're going to be taught tactics like always guess B or stuff like that, instead of actually learning how to get to the correct answer. They're going to learn ways to cheat the system, and that's really an issue because they're not learning at that point. They are just guessing. They're making educated guesses, which that can be helpful. Sometimes that is something students need to do, but the most important thing is they need to retain this information, not just know it for the test. The second main issue I brought up was it holds way too much weight. Students have so much pressure put on them with these standardized tests to do well because it's going to affect their future so much. If they want to get into a good college, they need a good ACT or SAT or both score. These scores can affect scholarships. If third younger and they're not worried about college, these tests can still hold them back. I remember in third grade, I did horrible on my reading EOG and my math EOG. And there was serious conversation of me being held back, and that caused me so much anxiety because I would try so hard in class and I was such a good student, but these tests I couldn't do. I could not do these tests. And that's another thing, the amount of weight it holds on your future as a student causes a lot of anxiety in people. And this anxiety actually there's been many studies done that have showed that anxiety can cause you to score lower than you should on these tests because you're not able to focus, you're not in the right headspace. So that's just another reason I'm not saying eliminate standardized testing. Instead, I'm saying let's make it not so impactful. Let's just use it as one little part and not a huge, do or die moment, like I think it is many times used. Secondly, these tests are biased. Standardized testing should be equal, and that's how a lot of times they're thought as, is it's the same test for everybody, so it'll show how effective you are. But like I said, students with, personally, I had a learning disability, which caused me to do poorly on these tests, and yes, I did get extra time, but it still affected me a lot. Students who are wealthier, also tend to do better on these standardized tests because they're able to do test prep or hire a tutor, and so they're able to buy these extra add-ons that help them prepare to take this test. They get cheats, like always guess B, or if you don't know the answer, skip it, or guess every, like if you don't know, guess. They learn these things that other students might not be able to because they're able to afford it. Some teachers will teach the test, which is great for their student because they're going to know the correct answer, but if you're in a class that doesn't get taught the test, then you're not going to do as well. And factors like anxiety and stress, if there's a student with major anxiety problems versus a student with not, more likely than not the student with less anxiety will score better, and that's not necessarily because they know the information more. And fourthly, your parents and the household that you come from also affect these standardized testing a lot. If your parent is supporting your academic career, if they're helping you study, if you're getting a good breakfast at home before you come, you're more likely to do good on these high-pressured tests than if you're not, eating a good breakfast. If you don't have that parent support, you're less likely to do as well as the students who do. In conclusion, I want to make it very clear, standardized testing should be used as a tool to gauge where students are, what they need to work on, but it should not affect a student's future. It should be looked at, sure, it should be there to see if a student is where they need to be, if maybe we should look at holding them back, if they would be a good fit at this college, but it should not be used as the one thing that we look at. And I think it is, and if it isn't, it's given the students have this perception, if I fail this test, if I don't get a 29 on the ACT, I'm a failure, I'm dumb, I'm not going to be successful. So as teachers and as administrators and as parents, we need to set the record straight. You're not dumb if you don't do well on this. You're not going to fail. Take it again, or let's see why. Why did you get this score? What do you need to work on? But not just kind of write it off as, okay, they got a 16 on the ACT. They're never going to be anything with their life. And so that was my pie project on standardized testing, and I hope that you all learned a lot, and I know I learned a lot from y'all's projects. Thank you.